All right. Hey there. Welcome to MSL 101. This is a supplemental lesson on the basics of patrolling. My name is Captain Silver Beatty. I'm an APMS at the University of Montana Grizzly Battalion, and I'm going to be leading you through this lesson today. Now, I say this is a supplemental lesson because this does not fall under the MSL 101 ROTC curriculum. However, depending on how your program conducts its leadership labs, you may be experiencing some sticks lanes in the fall versus the spring. I know our program, we focus on squad lanes in the fall and then platoon lanes in the spring. And so this is just to give you an idea of what patrolling is so that you're more familiar with it before you just step out into patrol situations. Now, if you're familiar with my videos, you already know that QR code right there is going to take you, if you scan it, to a website version of this exact same lesson. And there's multiple benefits to actually scanning that and having it on hand. One being there's some embedded links and videos that'll give you some resources to get just a little bit more in-depth information on what we're going to talk about. And it also, depending on when you're watching this, might be the most updated version of this lesson itself. So I'm recording this right now in October of 2024. If you're watching this in follow-on school years, there may have been some slight changes to the curriculum about patrolling. And so that QR code should take you to a more updated version if those changes have been made. Now, I always also encourage that you have out a piece of paper or a pencil or a pen, maybe a Word doc open off to the side to take some notes, so you have things more readily available for you to go back to and reference in future times that you may need it. All right, so let's just dive right in. Here are some read-aheads and resources that you can go to get some more in-depth information like I talked about. There's a read ahead on patrolling itself, and there's also a YouTube that I've done in the past that talks about patrolling basics at a little bit of a deeper level that you can always click on and watch as well. All right, so let's talk about patrolling. Now you see there that quote. It says, "To secure ourselves lies in our own hands, but the opportunity to defeat the enemy is provided by the enemy himself." Now when you read that, how do you think it applies in the context of basic patrolling? Well, something to keep in mind is that when you're away from the main unit, as you would in a patrol operation, you are responsible for your own safety, security, and your own success. So how might patrolling actually apply to the second half of the quote? How does it mean to find opportunities? Well, in order to find opportunities, you have to look for them. If you don't step outside your comfort zone or your patrol base, you'll likely never discover the opportunities available to exploit the enemy and defeat them. And to find the enemy's weaknesses, you have to actually seek those out. So just keep that in mind as we talk about patrolling in general here going forward. So what do you think? Why do you think it's critical that you actually understand basic patrolling techniques and information? Well, for survivability, the basic principles can be applied to everyday life, but when we're talking about patrolling in a military context, it's also all about surviving. So how do you think we actually mitigate the potential for that enemy threat as we conduct patrols? Well, we keep in mind these principles of patrolling, and we plan ahead just as you plan for any other successful operation or mission. So what do I want you to know by the end of your time with me? I want you to be able to identify and explain the two main types of patrols and the different elements involved with those. I want you to know the main purposes for patrolling itself. And I really want you to identify and understand the 5 principles of patrolling. And we're going to go through all of this during this video. So what is a patrol? You'll see 2 photos there that kind of show patrolling, what they are, but the definition itself is a detachment, so a smaller element, that's sent out by a larger unit to conduct a specific mission that operates semi-independently and then returns to the main body upon completion of that mission. So patrolling itself at a very basic fundamental definition level is just a large unit sends out a small unit to go get some information, potentially, depending on the type, maybe to deter. There's all kinds of different things that come with a patrol, but it gets what it needs to, comes back, and then gives the information to the main body. So we're going to watch a basic patrolling overview video, and it's going to give you a brief idea of what a patrol is. Now, while you're watching, I want you to take note of the required tasks, objectives, the elements involved, and the leader roles that occur during a patrol. I also want you to keep in mind the special teams, the organization, and specific team member roles and their descriptions.
To accomplish an assigned patrolling mission, a platoon or squad must perform specific tasks, to include security, passage of lines, occupation of rally points, and crossing danger areas. They must also accomplish patrolling objectives, such as recon, actions at the objective, etc. As with other missions, the leader tasks elements of his unit, platoon, or squad in accordance with his estimate of the situation. Identifying those tasks the patrol must perform, and decides which elements will perform them. Where possible, in assigning tasks, the leader should maintain squad and fire team integrity with chain of command continuity during the patrol. The basic patrol is organized into the following elements. The headquarters consists of the patrol leader, assistant patrol leader, radio telephone operator, RTO, forward observer, FO, and FO RTO, if required and attached. Additional headquarters elements may consist of any other attachments that the patrol leader decides that he or the assistant patrol leader must control directly. This often includes any machine gun team. The platoon or squad leader is assigned as the patrol leader. The platoon sergeant or assistant squad leader is assigned as the assistant patrol leader. Aid and litter team. Aid and litter teams are responsible for treating and evacuating casualties. Enemy prisoner of war team. EPW teams are responsible for controlling enemy prisoners in accordance with the 5 S's and the leader's guidance. Surveillance team. The surveillance team keeps watch on the objective from the time that the leader's reconnaissance ends until the unit deploys for actions on the objective. They then join their element. En route recorder. The en route recorder records all information collected during the mission. Compass man. The compass man assists in navigation by ensuring the lead fire team leader remains on course at all times. Instructions to the compass man must include an initial azimuth with subsequent azimuths provided as necessary. The compass man should preset his compass on the initial azimuth before moving out, especially if the move will occur during limited visibility conditions. The patrol leader should also designate an alternate compass man. Paceman. The paceman and alternate paceman maintain an accurate pace at all times. The platoon or squad leader should designate how often the paceman is to report the pace to him. The paceman should also report the pace at the end of each leg. Machine gun team. The machine gunner carries the M240 machine gun with assistance from the assistant gunner, who usually carries a tripod, spare barrel, and additional ammunition.
All right, so I hope you were taking notes on some of that stuff. So I want you to just think through this. After watching it, what do you think are some examples of what we would use a patrol for? And what are some of the elements that you noted from that video that are related to patrols? Now we're going to go over this throughout the rest of this lesson, but just keep that in mind of what I want you to focus on as we go through. So what do you think? How do you think a patrol could be advantageous in a foreign environment? Well, a patrol allows for gains in intelligence, so it helps us get information. And it also allows for forces to either contact or defeat the enemy with the smallest possible element, or what we call economy of force. So do you think it's possible to conduct operations without patrols? If so, what would be the trade-off of not utilizing a patrol? Well, it is possible, but it's the exception. It's not often optimal, and those trade-offs can result in unnecessary casualties due to poor intel or by committing larger forces without a refined plan. Those patrols help you gain information that you need to prepare your next operations accordingly. Now, do you think it's important to structure every patrol for contact or combat? Why or why not? Well, yes, it's absolutely important to structure it that way because many reconnaissance patrols actually end up in contact. There's no such thing as a courtesy patrol. You may have heard that term before, it's commonly used, but there's no such thing as that. all patrols require preparations for a contact contingency. So you have to be prepared to receive contact. All right, so what are our types of patrols? Well, we've got combat patrols and we've got reconnaissance patrols or recon patrols. These are your two main types, but they have other elements or other types within them. So a combat patrol, those include raids, ambushes, and security patrols. A raid is considered an attack where we withdraw quickly. So some people call it a smash and grab. So a raid is we get in very quickly and aggressively and we get back out quickly. An ambush is a surprise attack from a hidden or concealed position. And a security patrol is meant to protect the area and detect any threats to your people or your unit. So those are your combat patrols. And then we have our reconnaissance patrols that are broken down into area, route, and zone recon patrols. Now, an area recon is meant to survey a specific location. A route recon is meant to check path conditions. So think things like roads, trails, or other routes that you might be taking. And then zones, those zone recon patrols are meant to examine a broad area in a very systematic way. Zones are considered a lot bigger, whereas area recons are a specific location. So remember that. So how do we choose which type of patrol we need to utilize? Well, that's going to be based on a variety of factors, mainly the conditions you face. And those conditions can be broken down into what we call MET-TC. And you've probably heard that term before. It's a commonly used term to basically just say, it depends on what we're walking into. Now, MET-TC stands for the mission, task, and purpose, the enemy capabilities and their intentions, the terrain or physical environment, and the weather impacts, the troops and friendly support available, the time available for planning and execution, and any civilian presence and infrastructure. So as you can see, that's where we get this MET-TC from. Now, combat patrols, you want to select for missions that are aimed at engaging the enemy in combat, destroying enemy forces, or inflicting casualties and disrupting operations. Reconnaissance patrols are chosen when the main mission's purpose is to gather information on the enemy positions or activities, terrain details, or populace interactions or sentiment. So your combat patrol is mainly used for engaging and destroying enemies, whereas a recon patrol is meant to gather more information. So what are our purposes? Why do we conduct patrols? Well, they're used to gather intelligence, provide security, regain contact, protect infrastructure, engage enemies, and then to deter and disrupt. So what does all that mean? Well, the main reasons that we do that is to gather information on the enemy, on the terrain, or on the populace. We want to regain contact with the enemy or with adjacent friendly forces. We want to engage the enemy in combat or destroy them or inflict losses. We could use them to provide unit security or protect essential infrastructure or our bases. And we can also use them to deter and disrupt insurgent or criminal activity in the area. What you need to know is that the planned action is going to determine whether you should use a combat or reconnaissance focused patrol. So remember that statement right there. And that's how we're deciding using those different purposes and the reasons behind and the elements of each type of patrol to determine what we're going to utilize. So what do you think? Why would patrolling operations require a set of principles? Well, patrols are detachments from a larger unit, so they can be very vulnerable and they have to be able to secure themselves. So if certain procedures aren't standardized and adhered to, the entire patrol's overall mission could be in jeopardy, as well as the soldier's safety. So governing the patrol or using those principles actually maximizes both its potential and the safety involved. So what are these principles? Well, we've got 5 of them. 5 principles are planning, reconnaissance, security, control, and my favorite, common sense. Now that's great that there's 5 principles, but what do they actually mean? Well, planning involves the initial considerations, coordinating the passage through friendly lines, executing the departure and re-entry of those lines, completing the mission plan, and conducting thorough debriefs. It's a pretty broad-based principle. The reconnaissance principle includes conducting map and leaders recons to assess terrain and perform objective recon to confirm key details and what you need to know. The security principle involved means that those security measures are maintained all the time, along the patrol route, during halts, and upon departure and re-entry of friendly lines in order to protect against potential threats in the area. The control principle is enforced throughout the patrol. We use tools like the 5-point contingency plan, or what you might hear as the GOTWA, managing departure and re-entry of areas, and then establishing rally points to ensure mission cohesion and safety. And then that bottom one, common sense, my favorite, is really just the application of sound judgment and flexibility in your decision making. It allows the patrol members to adapt to unforeseen challenges while maintaining the mission integrity and safety. So using common sense in your decisions and how you're going to conduct your patrol is extremely important. So let's use some examples here. These are examples of when the principles are put into place during the patrol. So for planning, like we said, those are your initial planning considerations. That's when we're coordinating the passage of lines through different maybe phases or through the departure or re-entry of our friendly lines. It involves completing the plan and then debriefing afterward. The reconnaissance, examples of these are your map recon, leaders recon, and even a recon on the objective. The security principle, those examples, again, we're using that along the patrol route, at halts, and departure and re-entry of our friendly lines. Some examples of our control, well, we're using that throughout the patrol with things like our 5-point contingency plans, departing and re-entry again, and using rally points to control. And then common sense, these examples are adapting our plans, avoiding bottlenecks, modifying our routes as needed, increasing our vigilance, staying flexible, and prioritizing our critical tasks. So that's how these 5 principles of patrolling play into an individual patrol itself. Now remember, these principles just act as a guideline and they govern patrols. So they're just a guideline, but we want to adhere to all 5 of these principles to increase our safety and our effectiveness. So what do you think? Why is common sense literally a principle of patrolling? Well, every patrol is subject to what we call that MET-TC, and therefore our plans can change. So adding this principle actually acknowledges that flexibility and common sense should ultimately drive that patrol. And because we know that patrols act semi-independently and they move beyond the direct fire support of their main unit, and they often operate forward of their friendly units, coordination has to be thorough and detailed. So leaders have to plan and prepare for their patrols using things like the troop leading procedures or the TLPs and an estimate of what situation they're facing. They have to identify the required actions on the objective, plan backward to the departure from friendly lines, and then forward to the re-entry of friendly lines. So that is all of the basics of patrolling, kind of a quick down and dirty. I hope that now you feel more confident in identifying and explaining those 2 main types, right? So we have the combat and the reconnaissance patrols. And then within combat, we've got 3 different types: raid, ambush, and security. And then within reconnaissance, we have area, route, and zone elements. I hope you feel better about understanding the purposes of why we patrol. And I hope you feel better about identifying and understanding those 5 principles that we just discussed. Now, if you still have questions on this, I heavily encourage you to reach out to your primary advisor or instructor, maybe a high-speed MS3 or an MS4 that can help you out. And if you still can't get those questions answered, feel free to reach out to me Depending on when you're watching this, you might still be able to reach me at silver.beatty, Beaty, at mso.umt.edu. Thanks for hanging out with me through this video. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you on the next one.